Hey guys, Timmy D with DroneMappingTools.com. In this video, we're going to go over the specifics of planning a LiDAR mission in UgCS. You may or may not know about UgCS, but it is the Cadillac of all mission planning software. I mean, it is truly the cream of the crop. Most expensive, but it is the cream of the crop. And so we are going to go over all the details and what you need to know specifically in this video for planning a LiDAR mission. Now, I will be completely honest and tell you that UgCS is not the most intuitive software, but it is very powerful. And there are many different scenarios where UgCS can be used to run very complicated missions. Now, I am located in North Mississippi, just south of Memphis, Tennessee, in South Haven. And the fact is we have very little in the way of terrain changes here, but there are parts of the world that have extreme terrain changes. They may have a lot of structures, and UgCS will allow you to do some very detailed planning so that you can safely fly in areas where there's a lot of terrain changes and where you have a lot of structures that you need to fly around. Go ahead and tell you this. Last weekend, I did a recording from start to finish on planning, acquiring, and processing LiDAR data. So that is going to be a complete tutorial on the entire process for flying, acquiring, and processing LiDAR. So if you are new to LiDAR, you're thinking about getting LiDAR, it is going to be a very good video to take you through every step. I have the Topo Lidar 100, which is an excellent system. I've had it since, about a year now. And so it is wonderful. And if you are purchasing or getting a Topo Lidar system and you want to know, well, how do I do this? How do I set it up? How do I acquire my data and process? This is going to be your video. So anyway, I look forward to getting that complete. There's a lot of clips because I recorded the tablets, the laptop, everything was recorded. So there are a lot of moving parts with that video. So it's going to take me just a little bit to get all the video editing complete. But hopefully in the next 3 to 4 days, that video will be complete. So let's go ahead and dive in, and I'll switch over to UgCS. Now, UgCS comes in 3 flavors. And just so you know, the name of the company that develops this is SPH Engineering. The name of the mission planning software is UgCS, but a lot of people think that is the name of the company, and it's not. So just letting you know. When you come into UgCS, and you are ready to plan your mission. Ooh, and one other thing I need to show you. Give me 1 second. I am going to come over to mission planning. This is on DroneMappingTools.com. So if you need to purchase UgCS, then obviously you can go and do that at DroneMappingTools.com. UgCS comes, as I said, in 3 flavors. UgCS Pro, I'll call it U Pro, is really for photogrammetry. Very powerful mission planning for photogrammetry. The U Expert is going to be tailored for LiDAR mission planning. And so it is very similar to the Enterprise version, except that it doesn't have live streaming and a few other features that are found in the top level, which is the Enterprise. So what I'm showing you today is the Expert, and what we go over today, that's what you can do to really do some nice stuff with your LiDAR planning. So I just want to point that out. So once we have UgCS opened up, and if you had a specific address that you need to do a flight, you can actually just come in and put the address up here in the top right-hand corner. This is where I did the complete tutorial. So I'm just using this same area to go over the mission planning. And in this video, I'm going to go over a lot more details of what the different options are. When I did the plan for the complete tutorial, I just laid out a flight and ran with it. I didn't go into a whole lot of detail on all the different options. So this video is going to cover that. So when we open up, we are ready to start a new mission. So I'm going to come up and click on the triple decker hamburger patty right here. I'm going to click on that and click new mission. Now, when I do, it is going to put the overall, what I call the plan name up here in the top left-hand corner, and it'll be mission of, date, and time, which is absolutely worthless in my opinion. So I'm going to click cancel. And the first thing I want to do is go up and rename the plan, because underneath this plan name, which they consider that the mission name, we can have multiple missions underneath that, or multiple routes. We may have a Lidar mission. We may have a photogrammetry mission for colorizing the point cloud. You may have a mission to go in and do a facade scan, all at the same physical location. So in this case, I'll put in the date, what it's for, hit enter. Now we are ready to add. And when you name the route, this is where it's really good to name it with the unit you're going to be flying. So I'm flying the M600 Pro, and this is going to be a Lidar mission. We're going to fly it at, say, 164 feet. And I'm putting 164. I mean, normally I'd probably pick something like 175, but I'm going to pick 164 because I have a chart that has the flight paths, the width of that calculated out based on a percentage. And I want to show you that it is the same if you use a percentage in UgCS, or you have a chart and you specify, I want it to be at this many feet apart. So that's why I'm doing 164. And then we're going to do 164 AGL and 40% overlap. Okay, so that'll tell me what the mission is for. I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to pick the M600, but just about every unit you could be flying should be in this list. If it is not, you can create a custom profile for whatever you're flying. You can even take an existing profile and then edit it and customize it that way. Maybe if you have custom payload, you have accessories on there that would change the weight. And I'll do a separate video in setting up your custom profile. There's not much to that, but that still would be another video in and of itself. But I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to pick M600, hit next. If you are taking off on the top of a building, a structure, a table, for whatever reason you are above what is just normal ground level for that location, then you would enter the height of that here. And that's because your mission is going to be based on ground level here, and you're taking off, say, 50 or 60 feet above that. You need to enter that in so that it does not negatively impact the planning of your mission. So that's important, and if for some reason you were down in a hole, I have no idea why you would be taking off from a hole, but if you are, you would enter a negative number in this field as well. Now, here's where you're going to enter your maximum altitude you want to fly, so that for me is usually 395. And in this section, if you put do not modify, if a return home is initiated, then whatever altitude you are at, it will return home at that altitude. If you come and specify an altitude, so I'm going to specify 350. Then if it is lower, if I'm flying the mission at 164 feet, it's going to ascend to 350, fly home, and then land. You can override that by just pulling down on the elevation stick. It will stop the ascension and it will fly home. So I just set that at 350. Trajectory type, straight. If you have a waypoint here at 20 feet, your next waypoint is at 200. It will fly a direct ascending path from 20 to 200. If you have safe, then all your different waypoints, it'll go up and down before it goes to the next waypoint. In general, I never fly with safe. I'm going to fly with straight and just plan accordingly. So that's what I would recommend. I'm going to hit OK. And it'll prompt you to enter a waypoint to start with. I'm going to close that because what I'm going to do is just come in and I'm going to insert a takeoff. So I'm going to hit takeoff. And that you have to have, if you want to enter a landing waypoint at the end, so it'll just auto return to home. When it's done, you do have to have a takeoff waypoint in order to do that. So I'm going to do, this is most likely where I'm going to take off. This does not have to be exactly where you're going to take off. Now, if you specify that your takeoff point is here, and let's say I came to this area and I was going to try to take off over there, you will get a warning that says, hey, you are taking off from a pretty good distance from what you specified. This could greatly, let's say you had a big difference in terrain, this can greatly affect your flight plan. Do you really want to do that? It could be up or down. So it will give you a warning, which in this case here, this is all same altitude, so it really wouldn't matter. But for you, if it did, you would need to make some adjustments. Now, there's my takeoff. So the next thing you want to do is you want to insert your calibration pattern. So to my knowledge, all LiDAR units need to have a calibration pattern. And that's when you take off, you're going to run what's most popular is a figure 8. So I've clicked on the figure 8, and I'm going to come over and say I want to run it right here. It will come in and be the same. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Boop. I did not change the takeoff. So what I needed to have done was when I entered the takeoff waypoint, I needed to specify, hey, I want to run this at 164 feet. Then when I added the next segment, which was the figure 8, it would have automatically put it at 164 feet, but it did not. So I'm going to go ahead and change it here. And then moving forward, all the other segments will be at 164 feet. Now you can change the size of this pattern. To have good LiDAR data, you want a smooth flight. And so I wouldn't want a tiny little figure 8 where it was just very tight and it was actually doing a lot of banking to make that turn. I don't want that. So I typically have mine at 200 by 100. You can, if for some reason you wanted a squishy figure 8, then you can do that. So several versions back, you just specified the diameter of one circle and they were both the same. But now it has been updated so that you specify the height and the width. And if you want a symmetrical, both to be same, and just be the height is double the width. So we have now entered the figure 8 pattern. The next thing we want to do is I want to enter a single waypoint. And the reason I'm going to put that in now is that this waypoint can be used later to change where your start point is. So when you create your boundary and it automatically creates the mission, the way that you would adjust where the starting point is by taking this next waypoint that we're going to insert, and you would move it to a different point in the flight area. But for right now, boom, it's right there. Okay, and you see this one did come in at 164 feet. So we are now ready to add the Lidar area. Now there's a Lidar corridor, and I will do another video specifically on the corridor. So for right now, we're just going to deal with the Lidar area. To do your first point in the area, you just come in and double click. So I'll double click there, come here, right there, here, double click again. And then to close it, you will single click on the first point. It will just default to the last settings that you used when you created a Lidar flight plan. To change the direction, you just mouse over the directional arrow, and then you just drag it into whichever direction you want to fly. So if you want to fly at an angle, you want to fly north, south. And as we make other changes, you may want to change the direction of travel to get better coverage in a specific area. And you may have concerns over, I do not want to fly over a part. Maybe I want to make sure that under no circumstances I fly over this tennis court center. It's going to be heavily populated with people, and I do not want to fly over the tennis court. So there might be various reasons why you're going to change your direction. And now we are going to look at some of the other parameters down here that will change how the flight is handled. I'm just looking at a straight nadir view here. If you want to pull it up and kind of have a 3D look at the flight, then I'd right mouse click, hold, pull back, and then you'll get 3D. And then you can also go left and right, and you'll see that little circle where my mouse is at. That's where I clicked. And so it will just rotate around that point. And if I want to go back to nadir, you just go all the way up, and then it will stop. It can't tilt back the other way. And then to pan left and right, you're just going to left mouse click and hold, and you can drag it left and right. And of course, the wheel mouse will just zoom in and out. Now let's go down and look at some of the, well, no, before we even do that, we're going to talk about overlap. So in general, 30% is probably the least amount of overlap that you want. 40% is a really good overlap. Above that is probably getting a little much, but now you may have certain situations where you do want a higher overlap. So in calculating your flight plan, UgCS can do this one of two ways. The most effective and just the easiest is if you specify the field of view for your LiDAR unit. And so for the Topo Drone 100, that is 105 degrees. Now, when you just get into geometry, at 105 degrees, if I fly at 60 meters, which is, what is that, 100? Give me 1 second. I just drew a blank. 197 feet. I should have known that. Okay, so at 197 feet, that is when the widest footprint, so the widest area that you are scanning on the ground, because the maximum distance for that Topo Lidar 100 is 100 meters, which is 328 feet. So the most efficient altitude to fly at is 197 feet or 60 meters. So that is where I'm getting the best coverage. Once I go higher than that, now the footprint begins to shrink because the distance is my limiting factor. The 100 meters does not change. So the higher I go, my bottom footprint, basically the triangle, if I can make, it begins to shrink because of height. On the flip side, when the altitude begins to decrease, what is the limiting factor is the fact that it still has 105 degrees field of view. So it's not that I lose distance, but the distance is limited because the field of view does not increase. So anyway, this is just a little chart that shows your scan width at different altitudes in both feet and meters. And that's it on that. So let me close this. So again, going back to UgCS, when you enter the field of view, what UgCS does just assume is that you will never fly at a height that is going to exceed the limits of your LiDAR unit. So in my case, mine is 100 meters, 328 feet. So I could never fly at a distance that's higher than that, or I would have no scan. So anyway, let's move on. So again, what I want to say is that the easiest way to do it is to put in your field of view and then specify your overlap percentage, and it will automatically calculate. Well, let's say that I did want to put in my side distance automatically, and let's go back to that chart just so I don't make a boo-boo. So at 164 feet, at 40%, 257 is the actual spacing of flight lines in feet. So 257, if I come back here and enter 257 and hit enter or tab, it's going to update. This plan right here should be identical if I switch up here to the 40% overlap. And they are. I mean, they literally, there's no change in that. So when I tell it 40%, it is still calculating exactly what it should be based on the field of view for the unit that I'm flying. With that said, doing the side overlap percentage is the easiest way to go. Now, moving down here, when we get down, this is just adaptive bank turns. Nothing fancy. This is really what I prefer to do because this is just simple. In most cases, I'm getting when you start flying a large area, I'm getting the most coverage per set of batteries when I just do simple adaptive bank turns. You can, if for whatever reason you need to do loop turns, then you can do that. And I'm going to show you what changes that. So 0, when you put 0 here, it basically just disables the loop turns. If I put in 90 degrees here, this is degrees. any turn that is under 90 degrees, less than 90 degrees, it will create a loop. And so when the drone is flying here, it can make an adaptive turn here, but when it gets ready to make the next turn, that was going to be less than 90 degrees. And so what it does, it comes in and it makes this loop, comes and goes around. Now, there's a couple settings that affect the way the loop is handled. If I come in this straight flight after turn, so every time it makes a turn, when I have 10 feet here, what I'm saying is you have to go at least 10 feet after the turn. So that is one variable that affects this loop. And then the other is the corner radius. So if I shrink the corner radius down to 50 feet, you're going to see that these loop turns, they start to get tiny. Well, when you get to a certain point, you now have made the drone go up and do a tiny little circle, and you're defeating the purpose of trying to keep a very smooth flight path. And so, I mean, you just have to kind of play with it. You go in there and say, okay, I want very smooth turns. Now, I can keep a 50-foot radius, but what I could do is increase this up to, say, 75 feet. Now, what happens is you will still have 75 feet after the turns, but your turns could still be pretty sharp. And let's say my radius was only 25 feet. Now, they're getting really tight. It defeats the purpose. So this gives you the freedom to specify whatever you want to have. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't make sense to have 75 feet and then come and make this very sharp turn. When actually what I may do is I would say straight turn, give me 10 feet, but I want a corner radius of, well, let's do 150. Okay. Now what happens? I just have a nice big round turn. It's bigger because of the radius that I specified, and it really has nothing to do with the feet that I said after the turn. So what's making it larger is the 150-foot corner radius. Now, you notice some of these don't have loop turns. If I increase this number, so let's go from 90, and let's say I go to 120 degrees. Now, most likely all of them, and they do, every one of these have a loop turn. And let's move up and see if they're, except for here, because see, that's the highest value that you can use here is 180 degrees. Now, so if that's the case, let me put 180 right there. 180, that means there should be a loop turn even right there. It does. That is insane. It puts a loop turn there. You don't want a loop turn. But 180 is the maximum value that you can put there. And so this was less than 180 degrees, and so it put a loop. Again, it makes no sense. So you have to look at your plan, and you have to enter values that make sense and achieve what you're trying to do. So I'm going to go back to, let's go back to 90 degrees. And again, I may look at this and go, you know what? I cannot fly over this tennis court. So maybe you want loops for whatever reason. Hey, I want loops in my plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the pattern. I'm going to fly in this direction. So now I'm getting good coverage. I get loops. And what the loops do, in fact, accomplish is that you can get a longer flight path that's extending past your boundary. For whatever reason, you may want coverage, maybe down in this area down here. So these loop turns do come down and give me good coverage past this corner, and maybe that's something that you need. Let's go up and look at this corner. Same thing. I might have some tree areas up here that I really want covered, and laying it out this way makes good sense, and it gives you the coverage that you need. Now, one more variable is the area buffer. And so if I put an area buffer, what that does, it extends in all sides. All sides get extended out, and it just extends the flight plan is what it does. So let's go and let's put in something big. I'm going to put in 100 feet and see that it will extend out in all directions 100 feet. So if you draw a path and you go, I just want it extended 100 feet. The reason you may do that is because what you have drawn is that you need good straight flight lines exactly at that line and maybe even a little bit beyond. And so you would extend the path so that any turns are outside of that and you have good, complete straight turns within the boundary that you've drawn. Maybe you import a KML and you know what? Everywhere that KML, I need good flight path all the way to the boundary. Or in most cases, when we do when I do a topo for the surveyors here, they need 50 feet and all the boundary on all sides. They need a 50-foot boundary that's going to be included in the final deliverable that I give them. And so, I may need to account for that. So I have the property boundary drawn, but I know I need good data 50 feet. Now, another thing, the topo LiDAR has a 30-degree view, so I'm getting 30 degrees front to back as it's flying, and then 105 degrees is going to be the width. So anyway, for what that's worth. What else? If you put a value right here in the overshoot, it totally nullifies all the other options. So let's just take this back to, I'm going to take that back to 0. And if I come in and I put in the overshoot, I come in and I put 50 feet, it will completely do away. Everything is gone. So the bottom line is, do not use overshoot. I'm not, I don't even know if it's a bug. I'm going to report that to them because technically, the manual will tell you that the overshoot does not apply in the loop turns. But what it should do is I should be able to say, hey, on my straight shots, front and back, I want a straight overshoot of 50 feet, and then it should adhere to the corner radius. So again, if I take this out, and that's going to be 0, and I take away my loop turn, I hit 0 to disable loop turns, and so I'm now strictly on a bank turn, an adaptive bank turn, which is using the 150-foot radius. If I come and say I wanted to overshoot by 100 feet both directions, the fact is it should do it, but what it did away with the 150-foot radius. I lost that. I now just have a pretty tight radius. I'm not sure what that is, and it may still be fine, but it is not adhering to, and so I can take that back to 0, and let's see. Now it's just doing a default radius, and I don't know what that is. So that may be a bug, but for right now, until that's fixed, you do not need to use the overshoot, and just leave it like it is, and we got a 150-foot radius. So, gosh, I guess I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? Yes, there is. One other important detail. Let me do this. Everywhere you see the yellow pin, this is a waypoint, and it is actually doing above ground. It's a terrain following is what it's doing, and I specified that by saying, hey, my altitude mode is based on AGL, above ground level. AMSL, above mean sea level. There's going to be no variation. It is not. That means it is not terrain following. So some softwares will call it terrain following. In UgCS, AGL is terrain following. Mean sea level is just following mean sea level because that's not really changing much. So when you do AGL, down in the very bottom down here, what you're saying is that if the elevation is within, this is a 2-foot difference. And again, here there is very little change in the area. I should have pulled one up and went down in the bluff where we have like 100-foot change in elevation. If I take this and I say, you know what, I've got a tolerance of 10 feet. In other words, do not add a new waypoint as long as the change is within a 10-foot tolerance. So I hit 10. Well, now, if there is no change, if there's no, let's see, route has not been illegal flight height. So what? Let's see, what did I change? Oh, I'm sorry. So when I changed it from mean sea level to AGL, it wiped it out. In other words, it's going to make me put in what I want. So when I go back to AGL and I say I want 164 feet, I have to put that in again. But what I'm going to show you is that now we have very few waypoints. So the difference in change from, say, from this point here, which that's what this line is based on, this waypoint. From here to here, there's obviously there's a 10-foot, it's greater than 10 feet because it's adding a new waypoint. And it'll go from here back up to that one. So if I change this to 5 feet, now anytime the elevation change is greater than 5 feet, it will immediately insert a new waypoint. And so that's how you can more greatly follow the lay of the land. But for all practical purposes, if you know that, hey, if I can fly within a 5-foot tolerance and that's going to be good, well, then you're okay. If you needed to follow it tighter than that, I mean, I could come down, let's just, for kicks and giggles, I'm going to put 1 foot, and you're going to see how many, there's a lot more waypoints. That's still not a lot, but there's a lot more waypoints that have been inserted in there. So let's see. And it will always, as you make changes to the plan, down below, if you get a red notice, that means boop, it cannot go any further. There's an error that you've got to rectify. The yellow is just simply a warning. And what it's telling me, hey, there's problems with your camera trigger. Well, I'm glad it said that. I do not have a camera mounted. So in that case, I'm just going to delete the camera parameters. If you are going to be flying the M300, and let's say you're going to have a Topo Lidar system mounted on there, but you're also going to have the P1 camera, and you're going to have that mounted. Well, you can, in your profile, you would have the specific camera and the lens that is on there, and now you can trigger photo events based on time or distance, whatever you want to specify for the photogrammetry part of this mission. I do not have a camera, so I'm going to delete this. So I will have no camera. And let's see what else. Camera trigger action. I don't know why it would, because I have camera none. So I can close that. There's no issue there. That's really it. So I don't think there's anything else that I would need to show you. What you would do now is, if this is on the laptop, now I can export this mission out. So let's say I prepare this on the desktop, which I have, and I want to use it on the laptop in the field. I can go up and export the mission. So if I export this mission, then I'll export it out as a JSON, a JSON file, and then you can turn around and import that very same file into the laptop and run the mission there. UgCS is in the process of working, and I don't know if we were within weeks, months. They're going to have it to where you will not need to use the laptop. You will be able to export this file out and export it to the Android device, and you will fly the mission strictly on the Android device, and you will not need a laptop. That is going to be a happy, happy day. And so again, I'm not exactly sure when that is slated to be released and updated, but it is forthcoming, and that's going to be, to me, that's going to be a game changer. That is, it's already just the cream of the crop. But once you take away the necessity to have a laptop kind of tethered to it, then that's going to be very nice. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. I hope this has been very helpful. Man, I know, as sure as I'm sitting here, this went a lot longer than I intended, but I hope going through all of these options explains what they do and, what they change. Because otherwise you just sit here and you start playing around with variables and you wonder, well, why did it change? What's it doing? So if it's helped, by all means, please give me a thumbs up. Look for the complete LiDAR training video that will be out in the next 3, I don't know, it could carry on to 6 days. A lot of editing. But I'll have that ready. Wow, there's a lot more videos that come. I could sit here and just list all the topics that have been written down, what we're going to do videos on. But if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. We're going to have a lot of good stuff coming out on a regular basis. So again, Timmy D for DroneMappingTools.com. I will see you in the next video.